I'm here with Dr. Christy Koss, and she's a Portland pediatrician who has 2 kids who have sensory sensitivities. Hi, Christy. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
So let's talk about some of the myths of sensory processing sensitivities. What would you say they are, the common myths?
Well, there's a few. Some people don't really understand what is meant by the name sensory processing issues. You can have many different sensory systems affected. It can be bright lights or loud noises. It can be clothing or tags, the tightness of the clothing, the fabric of the clothing, how well it breathes. Very, very tactile issues with foods as well as play material if they don't like to finger paint or get their hands dirty. So you have a lot of different senses covered, and then on top of that it can affect how they respond. And so you'll have people who mistakenly think that kids with sensory issues are autistic or on the autistic spectrum because they can't do loud noises or they need to spin for that sensory input of movement or walk around a lot. You'll also get the thought that they are maybe not as intelligent as they are because they have a hard time expressing themselves when they're younger and explaining their sensory problems. And so a lot of times they'll just melt down. And then you can have kids who are thought to be ADHD. Again, you can have ADHD and sensory issues. I have one that has both. And then you can have just sensory issues, and that can look a lot like attention problems when their senses are bothering them.
Right. So 2 of the main myths then are that the kids are autistic and they're not very bright.
That's correct.
So what do you think is the best educational environment for these kids?
That's a hard thing to say. I think that there are some wonderful teachers out there who have adaptive seating for their kids. They'll let them pick the kind of seat they want to sit on, or they'll put elastic bands on their seats so they can pump their legs, or they don't mind if their kids get up and move around, or wear noise-canceling headphones. In which some place like that I think would be fine. But if you have a very rigid environment where the kids are supposed to be sitting still, they're not going to do well. I happen to homeschool both my kids, but I know that's not feasible for a lot of people.
So what is it that makes them want to move around?
It's like a revving the engine. They don't let that energy out. It has to go somewhere. So they're going to start wiggling, and they're going to start fidgeting, and they're going to start exploding because the energy's building up until it has to come out. It's like a volcano.
Can you say anything about your kids' experience in what Moira calls brick and mortar schools?
Brick and mortar schools? My son experience was actually okay. His first grade teacher, before we pulled him out, had a child with issues, and so she was okay with him hiding in the corners, just to get away from all the stimulus. His sister did not have that great of an experience where she was sitting at tables and she was supposed to stay seated and got in trouble a lot for getting up and just moving around or talking, because she's very talkative. And neither one of them felt like they got enough energy out.
Mm-hmm.
They would want to go and swing on the swings, especially my daughter finds that very calming.
Mm-hmm.
But there were only 2 swing sets on the playground at school, and if they were taken, that was it. She couldn't swing during recess, which made her nervous for the next class. And even now at homeschool, when she gets frustrated, she goes outside and starts swinging.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just her way of calming herself. It's a great self-calming mechanism, and she knows it helps. But if she couldn't do that, she would yell a lot more and throw a lot more things and not be able to calm down herself enough to express her feelings.
Mm-hmm. So when the kids are overstimulated, they sometimes melt down.
Yes, they do. They do melt down. And as when they're young, they don't know when they're getting overstimulated. So an important thing that we have worked on is letting them know when they're starting to get overstimulated and making them take that break and making them learn that the breaks are just as important as the play. And learning to self-regulate what is their body telling them that they need, not just what everyone else thinks they need.
Right, to understand what they're feeling and what they need to do.
Yeah, if their body's telling them they need to move around, then they probably need to move around and not try to stay still and not pick a still activity.
So, when they're in school, it seems like educators don't always understand them.
Sensory processing issues are new to a lot of educators. They haven't been, even now I think a lot of them have never heard of them. And so they hear of kids being picky about their clothes, or kids being picky about their foods, or they just assume it's a kid who has trouble adapting more than that it feels, if they have the uncomfortable clothes, what they feel is uncomfortable. It's like pins and needles are itching for them, and it's more than just an annoyance. It's really something they have to change.
As Michael says, it's like a bomb.
It's like a bomb.
Yes.
It's like sandpaper on their skin.
Right. All right. Well, thanks so much for talking.
Absolutely.